This is Faith Family Cars Podcast. I'm Jerry.
I'm Zach.
Hit the key.
Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. That was James 4, 7 through 10.
Hey guys, welcome back to Faith Family Cars Podcast. We're glad you joined back in for another big episode for us. We got a guest today that we've been excited about having on, and you guys will probably recognize him by his YouTube and Instagram name of BrickRodGarage. He has 36.9 thousand followers as of right before this podcast, and you probably will know him from his memes. So today we have Eddie Papp with us today. Eddie, it is great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really excited to be here.
So how's things going today?
Things are going good. You know, it's a Friday and weather's finally nice. It's not been overcast today, so looking forward to the weekend.
We had some sun here today. We've been overcast for several days too. Yeah, it was nice to have sun. Yeah, so Eddie, we got connected through, I guess, the mutual friend now, Mark Frisbee.
Yes. Mark's really good at doing that. He's really good at connecting people.
Yes, he is. He's connected us to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I'm blessed that he connected us with you, because just being able to talk to you recently and watch what you do on Instagram with the hilarious memes and stuff. I mean, which I've seen your stuff before and not even realized who you were. And that's probably a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm almost positive I've seen like tons of your memes, and I just never really knew it was you.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice part of where it's at right now is I'm kind of hidden behind it and slowly starting to come back from behind the curtain a little bit, kind of like the Wizard of Oz a little bit. So
Yeah.
So when people are like, wait, that's you? It's like, yeah, that I did that. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. So it's good stuff, and we've got a lot to talk about, I think. So, but before we get into everything we're going to talk about, we're going to play a little game.
Oh boy.
We've decided to start this little trend of playing games with our guests first.
I think it makes for some interesting content.
Yeah, it was good last time.
It was. So we've got a game for you that there's, if people follow you on Instagram at BrickRodGarage, they have seen you talk about your new project. And so your new project is, very interesting to us because it is a Ford, or it's a Mercury, but it's a Ford.
Yeah.
So you recently bought, I'll just let you tell what you bought. Go ahead.
I recently bought, because I have a very amazing, supportive wife, I recently bought an 85 Mercury Marquise that is a roller. It's really solid, but it has no motor, no transmission. Because I wanted something that the whole family could fit in. And, well, with 3 kids, I was kind of limited in options. Like, well, the Mercury Marquis is technically a crew cab Fox body, so the whole family can fit in. So I'm excited about that.
Well, since that's what you bought, we decided today that we would play a Mercury Marquis trivia game, just to test your knowledge on what you just bought.
We decided today to become marquee professionals. So,
Oh, good.
Now,
at least you guys are, so you know if I'm wrong.
So, personally, I watch a guy on YouTube who does a lot of Ford videos, okay? And his name is Tony, and I can't remember his last name. But he just does these videos that talk about the history of different Ford cars.
Yeah.
And, of course, I had watched the video he did on the LTD and the Marquis. So a lot of this stuff I kind of already knew. But there's a couple of things in here that I did not know, and I was surprised about. So
if you being a Ford guy, if you didn't know him, I'm nervous now because mostly a Chevy guy. Grew up with Ford cars, but, man.
Well, hopefully you've already researched your car enough to know some of this, so I think you will. So we're going to start off with maybe this might be a little tricky. This is a true or false, okay?
Okay.
The
50-50.
Mercury.
I like my odds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is good. The Mercury Marquis was produced from 1967 to 2011.
I think that's false. I think it started earlier. But the
It is.
2011 is correct, though. I'm 75% sure.
Well, it is false, but
You're wrong and right at the same time.
So it started in 67, but the Marquis nameplate only went to 86.
That's right. Yeah, because it became the Grand. That's where people got confused. Like, so you bought a big car? I'm like, no, it's tiny. That's why I like it.
Yeah.
The Fox platform, not the Panther.
Yeah.
So that said, that leads us into a question that you've already answered multiple times. The 83, when the Mercury moved the Marquis to the midsize platform, what was the name of that platform?
The Panther. Wait.
No.
The Grand Marquis.
The Grand Marquis was the Panther. I'm asking you what the Marquis was on.
In
Oh, it was on the Fox.
1983.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Fox Money. Yeah, it was on the Fox
Okay.
Money.
I was going to say,
Thank you,
just
Leon.
said it all ago.
That
Yes. Now, the interesting thing, and I'm just going to throw this in here, it's not part of the game. Golly. So I'm just going to throw this in here. The interesting part is they had put the Granada on the Fox platform, and the Granada was not selling well. And so
it wasn't a good looking car.
No, it was not. And it looked so much like the Fairmont, too.
Yeah.
So, and the Fairmont looked better and more sporty. So people weren't buying a Granada. And so Ford came out with the LTD and the Marquis to replace the Granada. So that's just a little fun fact, I guess. It's Big Brother rides on the Panther platform, and you've already said this too. And the name of that car is?
The Grand Marquis.
The Grand Marquis. So the Grand Marquis name was used in the 70s, but it was just a trim level of the Marquis. So it was like the top of the line Marquis back in the 70s when it was the full size car. So, okay. This is going to be multiple choice.
Okay.
What engine? You do. You got good chances here. What engine was not available in the Marquis? The 2.3 Lima 4-cylinder, the 3.3 inline 6, the 3.8 Essex V6, or the 5.8 Windsor V8?
The V6, I think.
That is wrong. Man,
I don't.
The 5.8 Windsor was not.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah, I'm not doing good at this game at all, man.
Well, you got all the questions right that you had already answered before we even started.
See, so I knew a little bit about the car.
You need to think of it this way: you're 3 for 4. There you go.
I like that. That makes it sound a lot better.
Okay, so what years was the Marquis on the Fox platform?
It was 80 to 86.
You're close. I just said it a while ago.
You did. This is like my squirrel brain just like went out. Dang. I should know this. I looked all this up too before I bought the car.
Before you bought it.
Like, all right, what can bolt up to this car? What can make it work?
So we just talked about the Granada.
Oh, it's 79 or 81.
No, I got 83 to 86.
That's right.
It's only
I got
4
the 86
years.
part right.
Yeah, you did. So the Granada went from 80 to 82.
Yeah.
The Fairmont started in 78 and went to, I think, 83. And then the LTD Marquis went from 83 to 86. Yeah.
But look, you're still 3 for 5. There you go. You're still
Doing 20%.
Yeah, you're still doing good.
Right.
And I'm gonna be honest, I actually didn't know like 80% of these.
So you said you grew up with 4 cars.
Mm-hmm.
So you grew up in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you should be able to get this. I've got,
All right.
got faith in you on this. All right.
Whew.
What car preceded the Marquis in the Mercury lineup?
The Grand Marquis.
No.
Or the Topaz. No, the Topaz. The
Oh,
Topaz took over.
No.
the Topaz was out at the same time.
I don't know what a topaz
Was
is.
Mercury Sable.
Oh, dang, I even have one of those too.
that
I had the later one.
was the mid-sized car that took the place.
Yeah.
See, I really set you up on this because you're really not a Ford guy.
I know. I grew up with Ford cars, but it was mostly Chevy trucks. So it's like, dang.
Yeah. Oh man, this is going much worse than I thought it would.
Yeah. It
Okay.
did not. This is going to make Marks look really good.
It is. Okay, so Mercury made a high performance version of the Marquis, and it was called the LTS. Okay, now I say high performance, but it was high performance for 1985.
Yeah.
True or false? It was only sold in Canada.
I want to say that's true.
That is true. There you go.
I've never heard of that one. I know about the Marauder, but I never heard of that one.
So Ford made a LTD LX, which was a high performance version of the LTD, and then they made the LTS. Now, this is one thing I didn't know. I did not know about the LTS. I knew about the LX LTD.
Yeah.
The LTS was produced, but it was only sold in Canada, and I don't know that Canada had the LX LTD though. I think that it was just the LTS Marquis that went there.
Now, why do all other countries get the cool cars?
I don't know,
I
but
mean, like even Australia, they get like all the Utes and stuff,
yeah.
and they're all V8
It's really
powered. Why
not
don't we
everything
get?
cool.
I know. Why don't we get that? Like, why don't we get V8 Utes?
So on this car, it looks really cool though, because you know how your Marquis, the grill is like a vertical slotted grill, right?
Yeah.
That grill is all blacked out. The headlight
that
bezels
would
are all
look really
blacked out, and then it has the 3-spoke TRX wheels, very similar to the ones that were on the Mustang GTs at the time. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
the ones that are like a really weird size and hard to get tires for.
Yeah, they're a metrics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they're a metric size, but it's a really odd size.
Yeah, we still have a set of those. Don't
We do.
We can't
I look to get tires for it, and I have to ship from the Great Britain, and they're like $1,500 a set.
Whoa.
So yeah. So I was like, no, those will just sit up in a garage with rotted.
They'll
Yeah,
become really good wall hangers someday.
They will.
Well,
That's exactly what I'm.
we just can't like lie to somebody and sell them because
Yeah.
no one's gonna buy them if they know how much tires
Yeah.
cost.
Because that was me when I bought them years ago. I had no idea that that's what they were, and I bought them from a guy. And then,
And the tires were completely gone.
yeah, I started looking at the tire size, and I'm like, this is a weird tire size. And then that's how I learned about the TRX wheels. So, which Ford used in the early 80s. That was something I think they worked with Michelin on that deal, and they were trying to push this wheel and tire size. All right, so what engine came in the LTS? So I said it's high performance. So what engine came in the LTS?
It had to be some sort of 5-liter.
That's
But
correct.
Oh, I got one. Woo.
You got it was the 5.0 high output of the Mustang GT motor.
That would be a
I
fun
think
car.
Yeah, it would have been.
these LTS questions are gonna kind of be a guessing game.
Yeah, they are. Because none of us did. So the other thing about the LTS with the 5.0 in it is, well, I know the LX. I didn't read this anywhere about the LTS, but I'm assuming the LTS was the same as the LX. You could get it with a 5-speed too. So that made, and they only weighed barely over 3,000 pounds, even as a 4-door. So they were a really quick car.
So crazy. Imagine those things gutted. I mean, it'd be just like a 2-door Fox body.
Yeah. All right, so this is a multiple choice again. The LTS, you might be shocked by this. The LTS was only produced in 84 and 85. How many total LTS versions were built? A, 1,034, B, 134, C, 34, D, 11,034.
This is Canada, so I'm going to guess B.
You are correct again. 134
You're really good.
is the
Yeah, I don't know. I can get those oddball ones.
Yeah.
it
I
is
can't
the
imagine that many
rarest.
people in Canada wanting that.
Do what now?
I can't imagine that many people in Canada wanting that. Or they should have.
No. Yeah, no. It was the rarest Mercury ever built of all Mercury's built. Rarest.
Interesting.
Yep. It is interesting, and I'm thinking, man, if you ever find one of them, it's probably really not worth a lot of money, but it's
worth a lot of
me,
money
it's
to
a full
the right person, though.
Yeah,
You find that guy
But-
that loves Mercuries, and they're going to go for it.
yeah. It's almost like the Marauder, the late model Marauder that we know,
Yeah,
back then.
Yeah.
So
this
All right,
one feels almost better than the Marauder, though, especially with the manual transmission. That thing,
Yeah.
it would have been blacks.
They didn't make the Marauders in manual.
No.
That would have been a mean car in manual, though.
yeah.
All right. So we've got one last question. Where's he at right now?
What?
He's like 6-4, right?
I'm not
Or
doing real well.
6-3.
We're gonna give you. I've stopped keeping up, but we're gonna give you a positive. we're gonna say it's some positive.
I think it's a positive. I think
Yeah.
he's got more right than you.
You got a good record right
Somebody in the comment section is going to correct us on YouTube. They're like, no, he does not know Mercuries at all.
It's okay because we didn't know Mercury's either until we looked into this.
A little about this car.
He's a big stock car fact guy. So and it's been like that since I was a kid. Like he could state all the specs to the new Camaro or Mustang that's coming out, but I'm more on I don't know any of that, but I know the performance side of it.
Well, I used to know a lot more than I do now because when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I read Motor Trend magazine religiously. So when I knew all the specs of every new car, and family members would ask me, I'd be 15, 16 years old, and they would ask me, what kind of horsepower rating is whatever getting, and I could just ramble it off to them, and tell them all the options on the car and everything. This is off the topic, but we went to me and my dad was looking for a new car in 1993, so I was like 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in, and it was a Chevrolet dealer, and the guy starts talking about this Corvette sale, and I was like, no, you're wrong. And I started rambling off all these facts to me. I knew more about the Corvette than he did. And it was like,
You should have became a salesman.
well, I thought about it a couple
You
times.
kind of are now.
So anyway,
Salesman, though.
I always had fun, learning all that stuff. Now I don't keep up with it like I used to. It doesn't intrigue me like it did before. But
The cool cars aren't really much of a thing anymore.
no,
Not a lot of really cool cars out.
no, not
I
really.
used to do the same thing with Jeeps. I could tell everybody all about Wranglers and everything, and now I'm just like, are they coming out with another one? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got one. I
Everything
like that one. That's about where I'm at now with them.
yeah.
Everything's gotten so boring these days. I mean, like just like we were talking about with the LTS. I mean, you had an LTS back then.
Yeah.
You don't have stuff like that now. I mean, yeah, I guess you got the Explorer ST, but I mean,
It's
we're
not
like,
the same.
no, it's really not. It's really not.
No, all right. So here's question number 10, the final question. You gotta listen close.
Yes, this is a good one. So pay close attention.
The Ford LTD, it's going to take me a minute to get to the end of the question, okay? So just listen
All right.
close. The Ford LTD and Mercury Marquis have become the offbeat fox body that some have begun to hot ride and even make into drag cars, like yourself. Many, like sheep, have gone astray and put other manufacturers' engines in these cars. The most popular being the LS. True or false? It is a sin to put an LS into a Ford, Mercury, or Lincoln vehicle.
It is false. I'm sorry. I know you're going to say it's true, but it's false.
Come on, man.
This is I've been going down this rabbit trail since I bought the car 2-3 weeks ago, looking. Uh-oh. Sorry, phone kicked me out there. You still there?
Yeah.
I went down this rabbit trail for the last couple of weeks, just looking at. I'm like, because I was determined, because of Mark, I'm like, I'm going to put a Ford engine in this car. It's going to be awesome. But then I looked at the prices. I'm like, but man, for a 302, not even a good one, I can get an LS. So then I'm like, all right, well, how much is it for everything else for an LS? I'm like, oh man, it's not that much either. So I'm unfortunately probably going to do the LS route.
Like our discussion with him, the most expensive part is the ECU. You got to have something to control it. And, that's where you get into money.
Well,
That's what you want to do with the car, too. That's what we talked about in the previous podcast. So.
Well, the thing is, though, is like you got all these companies like Team Z Motorsports and stuff that make K members for it, especially for the Fox. And you can put anything in it for, I know my K member for a stock 5.0 to put, just a tubular K member for it, it was only like $350. So you can do the same thing with an LS or a Coyote or anything.
Yeah. The QA1, I looked it up. It's $500, right around $500. And then I'm like, but I kept trying to justify not doing it. I'm like, yeah, but what if I want to do a manual transmission?
Yeah.
For another $200, they sell the support. I'm like,
yeah.
Then between Holly and Aces and Phytech, they make it really easy just to put the computer on there to make it even easier. I'm like, man. And the guy I bought it off of said, I'm going to need to put some sort of Holly on there no matter what I run because he thinks the wiring harness is bad. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to spend all this money, I'm going to make some Ford guys really upset because it's probably just the better route to go. Sorry.
Well, look, it probably is the better way to go. We can't deny that.
Maybe.
We're purists, and that's why we have a little fun with this. And I knew we had already talked about this.
Oh yeah,
I'd already sent you messages about it, so I was like, I gotta make this a little fun.
I do want to mention this is kind of more of a car. It's not a bike or anything, but just a different route. You said you looked at QA1. Check out Team Z Motorsports and UPR. You might be able to find it a little bit cheaper, which I know QA1 makes really good stuff, but for like a K member, it's essentially all the same. So you might be able to find a little bit cheaper, like Team Z or UPR.
Yeah.
BMR does the same thing.
There's simple. That's what kind of drew me to the Fox Body platform. It's like a Wrangler.
Yeah.
There's so many people that make stuff for it. Like, there's no excuse not to build some sort of Fox Body because everybody's making stuff for them now.
Yeah, the Fox Body might be the most versatile platform.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, even in the SN95 is at that point too, because it's like it's literally the same car, just bigger. So that's why I keep picking those cars up because you can buy anything you possibly want for it. You put any motor in it. Big block, small block, LS. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, and some of your drag racers are moving to the SN95 anyway, because you can't hardly find a Fox anymore if you're one Mustang.
Yeah, the Mustang Fox bodies are just insane what people want for them, especially the last 7 years. I watch them go up. I'm like, nobody wanted these 5-10 years ago. Now they want $5-6 grand for a roller, and I'm like, something's not right here.
Yeah, it's crazy. So let's go from there and let's go ahead and talk about your new project. What are your plans? What specifically did you? I know you sought out a four-door. Yeah. Because you wanted the whole family to be able to ride in it, but why this project? Why
now? I'm turning 40 in January. I know I don't look like it, and I wanted to go on Power Tour this year. My wife and I
don't look like it.
Yeah, I know. I'm fine at the age I can appreciate it. And my wife and I, she's like, well, what do you want to do for your 40th birthday? I'm like, I want to go on Power Tour, and I have this C10 that I was going to take, but then after visiting Mark, I'm like, I'm not going to have the energy to do what I want to do. Like, I don't have a shop. I know some people that watch my videos, like, you have something. It's like, it's a workshop with not much room to do a full body swap. So I'm like, all right, what can I do that would make sense? So I started looking on Marketplace, and I'm like, you know what? I think some sort of Fox, like four-door Fox body would work. So I've got friends that my buddy Matt and his dad, Tim, his dad has a Zephyr and he has a Fairmont. So the last 2 years, I've been hanging out, year and a half, been hanging out with them. And I'm like, there's something to this platform. But then I realized, I'm like, I could get a four-door version and the whole family can fit in. Because that's my thing with me. Like, I struggle with them. Like, I have 3 kids. They don't always want to get involved with stuff, but I want them to have that option. If we want to go somewhere, hey, let's throw them in one of the vehicles. That's why I went with the four-door Wrangler. So I'm like, hey, if we want to go off-roading, we haven't taken it yet. But if we want to go do that, there's an option. They can all go with us.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to try to fit a car seat in the back of a Mustang. I'm going to tell you that right now. So it's good you went with the four-door option, try to find a four-door option.
And
Well-
I've always liked the sleepers too. That's like I've wanted,
Yes.
and that's the other thing too. I've wanted to build a sleeper for years, and I'm like, this is finally the opportunity where I can build the sleeper. The whole family can go in and have a blast with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always liked the wagons, whether the Fairmont or an LTD.
Oh, yeah.
Wagons are just really cool, but
Mhm.
it's hard to find those too.
I've looked at those too, and they're about as bad as a Mustang. Like
Yeah,
people
they are.
want $3,000 to $6,000 for those too, and I'm like,
Mhm.
and I've found a couple for like a couple $100, but it's like there's not much left of the car. I know
Yeah.
some people are like, oh, you can find them. Like you can, but I'm
Yeah.
trying. I've had a really bad habit of getting excited about something I see on Marketplace and dragging it home and going, I should have walked away from this and not brought it home.
Well, I've done that before.
5 years ago, I bought a C20 that I should have walked away. I was excited because my truck was still in Ohio. I'm like, I'm going to buy something I can work on here in North Carolina. I bought the most rusted truck in North Carolina. I should have walked away. It was horrible, but I was like, I'm going to do this. So I had to make a promise to my wife when I was looking at these cars. I'm like, I'm going to find one that is solid, that it's a clean vehicle. So that's what I was really looking for. And said, I actually went and looked at a four-door Fairmont about a year ago, but because of that bad experience with that C20, my buddy Matt, I'm like, I'm going to take my Fairmont Expert with me. He even looked at me like, dude, we got to walk away from this. This is bad.
Yeah.
And the guy was supposed to be a private seller, and even my son remembers this. So it's a great story. He'll tell his kids later. It's like, your grandpa took me to a chop shop. Like legitimately, I think it was a chop shop. There's some shady stuff going on there. Like we got there's no battery in the car, and the guy's like, it runs great. My buddy Matt, he's like, all right, I brought my battery, I started up, but it was a like buy here, pay here, body shop type deal. And then all of a sudden, he's like, I got to go at 5 though. I really got to go at 5. I'm like, you set up this appointment, and then all of a sudden, all these people showed up, and we're like, you know what? We're just gonna go. We're gonna go. But I'm like, all right, I've seen the 4 doors, and I want one of these now.
Yeah. That
over the
sounds like a
last year,
sketchy setup.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? I don't. That in the driver's seat was actually held up by like a 2x4. So I'm like, if I got rear-ended on the way home, it was going to be over. That would be.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, that's what I had to promise my wife is I wouldn't drag something horrible home. So
Yeah. Well, one thing about those Fairmonts, the dash in those looked very similar to the Mustang dash at the time.
Yeah.
And then when you looked at like your Marquis, the dash in it looks very similar to the Thunderbirds of that time. And I always liked the dash setup in those cars. I don't know what it is about it, but I just always thought they looked good. So
yeah, the dash needs work, but I like the shape of it. I know what you're saying there.
I like the setup. I like on yours. I think it's got the vents on each side, and the radio is like in the center and stuff. I just like how it flows, I guess. But you're talking about Power Tour, taking it on Power Tour, so that's your goal, right? So you got
goal. And actually,
what 7 months, 8 months?
Yeah, yep. And I bought it in October, and it's. When I tell people my wife is the most supportive woman of everything I'm doing on my channel, I don't think people understand. Like I was away in Indy on a 4-month training thing for work, and I would come home for like a week and leave. And then the first week of October, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go buy a car on Saturday, and I'm leaving the next day. And she's like, yeah. And it's literally sat in our driveway since. So that's how supportive she is of me in doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Well, it's good to have wives like that. My wife is the same way. She supports everything that we do, even though sometimes I know she don't see the vision. Sometimes I see the vision, and the vision's bigger than me, and I have to back out of it eventually.
That's the hard part, is getting them to see the vision. Because that's the thing I struggle with. I guess I can call her Angel now because she's been fully introduced to the channel. Yeah. At this point. But that's the thing with Angel is she doesn't always see the vision. That's what we're dealing with my Mustang right now. Yeah. It's just to see it when it's done.
Well, my wife most recently said to me that she almost looks at them as the investments in a way now, because most of what I buy, I end up selling if I decide I'm not going to work on it. Like I had an F-150 recently. I bought it back in October, and my plan, it needed a motor. My plan was to fix that truck for me as a daily driver. And then just out of the blue the other day, I just decided I was going to sell it and get rid of it. and I didn't lose money on it. So basically, that truck didn't gain us nothing, but I didn't lose nothing on it. So I was okay with that, just, because I knew it went to a guy that actually had just restored one just like it for his son, and he wanted to do another one for himself. So I'm like, hey, I'm happy about that, and I'll sell it to you for what I paid for it.
Well, I'll tell you what, he didn't lose any money, but the thing with him is when it comes to OBS Fords, like the OBS pickup trucks, he can find somehow, some way, the greatest deals on the planet on trucks. It's actually insane. I will religiously look at Marketplace for days and days and days, and I will not find the deals he does. And then he'll come home with like an $800 running and driving truck. And I'm like, how did you do that?
Years of experience and favor from God.
Yes, exactly.
He's kind of found this car. Honestly, it was God's favor. So I found a 2-door Fairmont that I really, really wanted, and the price was right. It was running, but something told me walk away.
Yeah.
My buddy Charles, I've got a really good group of car friends around me here. And so I told him about it. It's like, let me reach out to the guy. He was negotiating this while I'm in Indy. He's negotiating the deal for me for this car. But the problem was it was like 3 hours away, and the guy was trying to sell quickly, but literally the Holy Spirit said, stop. Do not do this.
Yeah.
And my wife was on board for me to get this car and everything. And I'm like, all right. I text him, hey man, let's just back off this one. This isn't the right car. At the end of the day, it's not a 4-door. I want 4 doors so my family can be comfortable. The next day the car sells. So I'm like, all right, it was definitely not meant to be.
Yeah.
And then especially when you're working nights, you get bored. You start like, man, did I make the right decision? I'm praying. I go to break like 2-3 days later, and Holy Spirit's like, check Marketplace. I'm like, this is stupid. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm like, whatever. And my car popped up, and I'm like, wait a minute. This car had been for sale like 6 months ago, and it disappeared. And I'm like, wait a minute, this car's for sale again. And I actually knew the owner. I met him at Cars and Coffee. So I'm like, all right, this car popped up. This car is 10 minutes from my house, and I know the owner. All right, let's see if we can make this work. And show my wife, she's like, are you sure this is the one you really want? I'm like, yeah, this is the one I want. I messaged him, and we worked it out, and he held it for me for like a week and a half before I could get home. I'm like, hey man, I know it sounds crazy. I'm like, I will send you money, whatever. He's like, dude, the car's yours. It'll be here when you come. So that's how I ended up I did. So
I definitely think for us as well, the Holy Spirit's always in what we buy, for sure. Because I mean, just with my Mustang, I mean, I was searching for a fun car. I wanted to be back in a Mustang, and this car just popped up. And the guy essentially had other buyers, but he let us come first.
Yeah.
And I bought it. I drove it home. So it's like, but that's how I feel about like all these things, that all the things we buy it is specifically there for us, because it just everything works out too well. I feel like sometimes. So, I definitely think God is in it.
I always pray about anything that we talk about, and he'll tell you that I've told him I didn't feel comfortable with something he was going to look at.
Yeah.
So you just got to trust that, the Lord's going to give you that intuition on
in all things.
Yeah.
In all things. I mean, jobs, cars, whatever you do, hobbies, anything.
Oh, especially jobs. That's
yes. Well, I mean, I actually just experienced that today. So I had an interview scheduled, and yesterday just felt like it wasn't right, and it definitely wasn't right. So
he went to the interview anyway and figured out it wasn't right.
Yeah. God's definitely in real quick. Oh yeah. I felt like as soon as they confirmed it yesterday, confirmed my interview, I was like, this don't feel good. And then I went and immediately, as soon as I sat down in that building, I was like, this is not right.
That's funny, because like we'll go through stuff and we get so frustrated at God, and it's like, hey, why did this happen? And then 6 months later, I was like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the job I have now, I wouldn't have applied for it if a job I used to work at turned me down. I was looking for another job. I went to an interview at a job I'd worked at a couple of years ago. I'm like, all right, I'm more qualified now. I built the resume they were looking for. Interview went well, and they ghosted me. And I was mad. I'm like, this would have been perfect. I know the system. I know how to do this. I was pretty frustrated. But now that the job I'm working at now, I see what God was doing. He was preparing for something even better than what I would have got. I was
Yeah.
willing to settle. And God's like, no, I got this thing that's way better. That's going to set you and your family up way more than you can even imagine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's God's timing. We've always got to wait on God's timing. Our timing is never right, ever.
No.
Yeah.
And too many times we lean on our own intuition and don't go to prayer. And, I think it's a thought that we all have at some point in our life. And I feel like right now in my life, I'm praying about more stuff than I ever have. I'm just trusting God more than I ever have.
I am too.
Well, as men, we're designed, we want to fix it immediately. And God has patience. And that's the thing I feel like God's always working on. It's like, slow down. You're going to get there. I want you to get more than you do, but you got to pace yourself. Like, you're not ready for it.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm ready. And you get to where you're going, like, oh, I wasn't ready.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for getting in the way.
Sometimes he'll let stuff like that happen, though, just so you know that he could show you, you weren't ready for this. You need to take a step back and let me have control of it.
Because it's all in his time.
Yep.
So again, about Power Tour, we'll be on Power Tour this year again. So hopefully we can hook up and maybe roll together some, and
that'll be a blast. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, which I don't know what we're going to take. I haven't decided. I really want my truck to make the long haul, but the Mustang is just so good at it.
Well, and then as well, we've got another fairly decent event that's going to be happening this year for the first time for us.
Yeah, which we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that later because it's not confirmed yet. But,
but Power Tour is confirmed. I've had so many people. I actually was going to kind of sit this year out, I thought, because of some of the other stuff that we're working on. And I had so many people, family members, and people that I've met through the podcast now that have reached out and said, hey, we're going on Power Tour too. Maybe we can all hook up. And I'm like,
absolutely.
Okay. Now I got to go.
It'll definitely be cool to ride with people this time.
Yeah.
Because, I think the last 2 times you went, it's just kind of been you and my brother.
Yeah, pretty much. We've rode, just picked up with different people. Like when the first year there was a whole group of Mustangs, so we just filed in with them and they let us hang out with them, so.
But now you actually will have like friends.
Yeah.
Like friends we're going with.
So go ahead.
No, that's what I'm excited about Power Tour, just to go hang out with the friends. Like you have these friends online, then you actually get to go meet them and hang out with them for a week, and you get to check out and just be with your friends. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Have you ever been on Power Tour?
I have not. I got to go when it came through Concord 2 years ago. I took a day off work, and that's the first time I got to meet Mark. Okay. I'm like, hey, I told my wife, like, look, we've been trying to go for the last 3 years. That we were supposed to go that year, didn't work out. So I'm like, hey, well, it's like the kids are out of town, they're visiting your family. Let's go so you can at least meet some of your friends, and we can experience and get an idea. And then we're supposed to go last year, and I changed this last year, and I changed jobs. We're like, nope, it just wasn't ready. So I'm like, this year, even if I had to drive my wife's minivan, we will be going. I don't know.
Well, that was the first year that we went, and we only did 3 stops. We started in Concord. So that was our first stop. We drove down to Concord, picked up from there, and I think it went to Charlotte and then Bristol. Is that right, or was that backwards? It might have went Bristol or it might have went Charlotte then Concord. Yeah, I think it did. So I can't remember. Anyway, that was our first year, and I actually met people I had been talking to on Instagram for several years for the first time there.
It's cool meeting your Instagram friends in real life.
Yeah, it really was. And then, of course, last year, the same thing. Got to talk to some of these guys again, meet up with them again. And I tried to meet up with Tim and Jacob, Sally's Garage, and it just didn't happen because they were in Nashville, and my truck broke down on the second stop. Well, on the way to Nashville. So
talk about this year?
Yeah, this year.
Yeah.
It broke down in between first and second stop, and so we spent our whole day getting him to bring me to the car.
Me is the greatest son known to man.
Yeah.
He left to work.
He's never going to let you live that down. Remember the time I took off work and drove to help you, Dad?
Yeah.
No matter what you've done for me before, I drove, and then I brought you a car so you could go more on Power Tour, and I went back to work.
He went back to work.
Yeah.
He went back home, went back to work.
I go back to work.
Next day, you did.
Oh, yeah, the next day, yeah. Well, no, it was honestly pretty great because I got to leave work early. I think we were pretty slow that day too. So I was like making all my jobs last as long as they could. And as a welder, that sucked so bad. But I was just making everything take forever. And then Dad called me and was like, "Hey, can you bring me a Mustang?" I was like, "Yes, I can." So I drove 2 hours there and then rode 2 hours back with his poor little truck on the trailer.
Yeah.
It'll make it this year. It will.
I mean, it's ready. It's ready to go
Yeah.
now. But it just, mistakes happen.
And it can do a burnout this time.
Yeah, you can.
It won't shear the axle.
Yeah, that's why it broke down. If you didn't know that already, sure to high
Yeah.
can burn out. So
Trying to do it for the kids and send it.
send it too hard. So anyway, Power Tour is a blast, and both years. But to me, the most fun part is riding through these small towns and all the people out there cheering you on and throwing candy and Hot Wheels out to the kids and stuff. It's just great. So hopefully we'll all get to hook up and we'll all have a good time. So, well, let's talk about your C10. So your C10 you've had since you were a teenager, right?
Yeah, since I was 14 is when my dad gave it to me. It was originally a buddy of mine's grandpa's truck. My dad bought it off of him, drove it for 4 or 5 years, and he was like, "I'm going to start restoring it." And then when I was about 14, he's like, "Now it's yours." I'm like, "Cool." So him and I worked on it. My buddies worked on it throughout high school, but I didn't drive. The first time I drove it, I was 20.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a long time.
It is.
Rough in your hands.
We've had, it's been through a lot. And the hard part is the first time I drove it was for my best friend's funeral. So like this truck has been, I think we'll get to that part in a minute, but my best friend, him and I worked on it throughout high school with some other buddies. When we graduated high school, he was a year older than I was. He went and joined the Marines. I went to Bible college, two different directions, but that happens. Then I got a phone call that he had passed away. The hardest phone call I'd ever got in my life.
Yeah, man.
Because to be honest, I thought I had a great grandma at the time. My mom called me and said, "Hey, call me back." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, she's probably telling me, and this probably sounds horrible. And every time I tell the story, probably does. I thought my mom was calling me to tell me my great grandma died. And I'm like, cool. She had been suffering from emphysema for years. I'm like, look, she finally got to go be home. This is great news. Yeah. She's not suffering anymore. Nothing could have prepared me for that.
Yeah.
And when my mom told me Nate died, like my whole world stopped because he was a brother to me. When I was in middle school, up until actually the whole time I was in school, I was made fun of a lot. I was picked on a lot, and God brought him into my life in middle school. He did some things to make the bullying stop. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah.
And
which is what a true friend will do.
Yeah, exactly. And we raced go-karts together. We built stuff, had just an amazing time in high school. And so when he passed away, I was in South Carolina at a youth retreat, and my wife at the time, we were dating for a month, and I told him, like, I got to go back home. She's like, I'm coming with you. I'm like,
wow.
So I said, my wife has been my biggest fan for 20 years. It'll be 20. We've been dating 20 years this next June, married 17. So
awesome.
When I say she's my biggest supporter from the moment we were dating, she has been my biggest supporter. So I go back to Ohio with her and all my friends. That was our therapy for a week because he died in Iraq. So it takes a while for people to get home after that. Mm-hmm. So all right, we got 4 or 5 days, and this truck was in pieces. Like the cab and the frame was over here. The bed was on the other side of the garage. We're like, all right, let's see what we got to do. And it was therapeutic for me and my friends. That's how we grieved for that week. We just painted and sanded and got it together. And so I could drive it in my best friend's funeral procession.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. So you all were probably up hours every day just thrashing on this thing. Yeah.
My dad has a really nice garage. It's a pole barn. we lived off of Mountain Dew, pizza, double cheeseburgers, and peanut M&Ms for a week. And we listened to Johnny Cash and Jerry Reed over and over and over again. And when Eastbound and Down would play, we'd start saying it faster, working faster. Then we crash for like a couple hours and we get back up and do it again. And now I look at my truck like, yeah, you could tell this was thrown together in a week. But
yeah, but it didn't matter.
It was worth it.
It was worth it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an awesome story.
Mm-hmm.
So what led you into ministry? So and a lot of people may not know what you do or what you've done in the past, but what led you into ministry? How did God call you?
God called me really early, which is strange for a lot of, which happens. I got saved I was in the 5th grade, so like 11 years old. There was a play called Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames that was going through all the towns. They still do. It's an amazing ministry. And my dad and my mom and sister drug my dad and I remember there was this scene. They said, if you guys people have never been, they need to go because it's pretty awesome. But there's a scene of this dad and son driving home from church, and they're talking about dirt bikes and all these things. As I said at the time, we had a dirt track at my parents' house. So we were racing go-karts every weekend. Saturday and Sunday, we were there racing go-karts. My friends would bring them. But I just remember the scene where the son is asking the dad questions about God, and the dad's like, oh, your mom's got enough religion for the family. And of course, they die, and they get for God, and they go to hell. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my dad and I both got saved on the same night.
Yes, that's awesome.
So then shortly after, when I was like in middle school, I just like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to be a pastor of some sort. So when I graduated high school, I found a Bible college. This God does weird. Just like a lot of people, God's done some very interesting things. The school I went to was started out of the Brownsville revival in Pensacola. It was a split off that called Fire School Ministry. And I'd known about them, and I'm like, I'm going to go there. And I'm going to be honest, this is the reason I wanted to go. The classes were Thursday through Friday, didn't start till noon, and all they taught you is your basic Bible stuff. You didn't have to have science, math, or any of that. I'm like, this sounds perfect.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is great. And I found out they had 2 schools. I said, this is how little research I did on this. I knew I wanted to go there, and I'm going to go there. They had a school in Pensacola, and they had a school in New York. I thought the school was in like Buffalo or something. And my mom, now, mind you, I come to find out everybody apparently applies to colleges in like the fall. I've already graduated, and this is like June, and college starts in August. And I start looking into it then. I'm like, yeah, this is the plan. We're going to go with this. I'm on vacation. This was my senior year, so my parents wanted to make sure I had a great time. I was visiting my grandma in Florida. My mom called. She's like, there's a problem. She's like, I'm like, okay, what? So that school you thought was like 4 hours away in Buffalo? Yeah, it's in New York City. I'm like, that's not going to happen. I'm like, I'm not going to New York City. In there, visit them. Like, there's no way you can pay me to live there. If you live there, I'm sorry. I'm sure you enjoy it. I can't do it in the city.
Yeah, no,
I can't either.
And she's like, I'm like, okay, well, the other school's in Pensacola, right? I'm like, I guess I could do the beach. She's like, well, there's a problem with that too. I'm like, okay. She's like, they're moving. I'm like, what do you mean they're moving? She's like, they're moving to Charlotte. I'm like, oh, okay, then I'll go there. So I applied and got in. And then I found out when I got in that most people get rejected. Like, they pray over their applications a lot, and like 50% of the people get rejected. And I applied like a month and a half before school, and I got in. I'm like, okay, God, you got this.
Yeah, it's got to be of God, because you don't apply in August and get in for the small, or in June and get in for the fall semester.
Yeah. And I moved down here not knowing anybody. The school's like, hey, we don't really have dorms. We're a small school. We're meeting out of a church and starting to find something. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. But there's people that are doing apartments and houses, so we'll hook you up with some people. Here's some numbers, call these numbers, and you can find a roommate that way. And I literally didn't meet my roommates till I moved in the day I moved in. And I had never moved before. That's the other crazy part. I'd never moved before. I lived in the same house my entire life in the same room. And here I am moving 3 states away by myself.
Yeah.
Like my family helped me move down, but I'm like, okay, this is happening.
Yeah. So, and that was a big transition just to do that before even starting school. I mean,
yeah. And it was definitely an interesting school. They focused mainly on sending missionaries, and I'm like, I want to be a pastor. I don't want to go overseas. Like, hey, once again, it's important, but I am not called to do that. If you're going to be a missionary, you definitely need to make sure you're called to go do that. And I'm like, I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. I'm like, I like America too much. Maybe that's not a good retirement plan. Like, I'll go to Africa and be a missionary. That sounds like a great retirement plan. That's why I joked around with people all the time. They're like, yeah, sounds like a good way to retire to me.
So you started into Bible college, and then and you were getting a pastoral degree?
Bachelor's in practical ministry. So it was a 3-year school because they did trimesters and semesters. That was the other thing too. I'm like, I can get a bachelor's in 3 years. This sounds fantastic. And it was a great experience. I got to learn a lot, got to see a lot of really cool things, and got a bachelor's in 3 years. So
cool.
Yeah.
So from there, you got your first pastoring job, right?
Yeah. After I graduated, my wife and I got married about a year later, and we decided we needed to move back to Ohio, where I was from, to go be near my family. And I got my first youth pastor job about a year later, and it was good for a while. Like, it was a really great time. It was at a satellite campus of a church. So, which anybody's ever worked at satellite campuses, I've got my own opinion on them now from working at several. I don't agree with them. That's me personally. I think if you're going to do a church, let it be a part of it, but eventually let it become its own thing. And actually, years later, that church actually ended up doing that.
Yeah.
So
I think I'd have to agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, me as well.
Because to me, I'm just going to be honest with you. This might upset some people, but I can speak from experience. I've worked with 2 or 3 satellite churches, and honestly, my question when they're doing it is, whose kingdom are you building? Like, that's my biggest thing. I think there was a time and a season for them, but I really think that season has passed. And I think if you want to have a sister church with the same name, but if you're putting a pastor on a screen, to me, I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
I don't feel as connected. I mean, even on times when I'm sick and I've got to watch our church service from the Facebook Live video, we can't get interested.
Yeah,
you can't. It just doesn't feel right.
It does. My wife and I have tried too, and we've gone to some really good churches and tried to watch online, like with kids not feeling good. It's like, you need to be in church. Like, we're designed to be in church and experience it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my first youth pastor job, the first year and a half was amazing. It was great. The campus pastor was doing some really awesome things. We were growing it, and just God was moving really good. But I got a phone call from the pastor. It's actually when I was on the way home from Canada. My dad and my grandparents had a cabin in Canada, and my dad and I went there to open it up. We were driving back, and I got a phone call from the pastor. I'm like, he knows I'm in Canada. This is weird. So I answered it, and he's like, hey, Eddie, just want to let you know, what you hear from me, I had an inappropriate relationship with a woman, and I'm sorry. And that was basically it. I'm like, what is even happening right now? Like,
yeah, you're just blindsided.
Yeah, like completely blindsided. Like, I'm telling you, like, things were going amazing. The church was going in a great direction. All of a sudden, it's like somebody has pulled the rug from out from underneath us. We're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So I call my wife, like, hey, this is happening. And instead of waiting some time, this is one of those things, there is no book on what to do when a pastor there might be a book, but you're in uncharted waters when that happens. When a pastor cheats on their wife, what do you do? How do you do it? So the main campus people came in. They had a little meeting right before church, told the rest of the staff, hey, this is what happened. And they literally went out there 10 minutes later and told the entire congregation.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And it's like, and my poor wife, she's like, what is going on? She's like, I'm on my way home. Like, I can't even be there for this to happen. And I'm like,
yeah,
you guys couldn't wait a week to at least talk to the staff, give us some time to process this.
To know how you all wanted to handle it. Sure.
Exactly. They're like that, but I guess they're in their minds. Looking back on, I think they were trying to get out in front of it because
that's where rumors started.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we're gonna get out in front of this and let everybody know instead of, hey, let's let the staff process and grieve this a little bit. I said I don't blame any of them because it's what are you supposed to do there?
How do you handle? Yeah, exactly.
So they brought in a temporary pastor there, and then they eventually hired another pastor. And my wife and I stayed for a while because, we were trying to show unity. We're like, hey guys, we're behind these new people, because when something like that happens, it rocks a church. Like it just sends shockwaves. It changes people's faith. Like even my brother-in-law, he's like, man, he married us. And like, he was like newly saved. He's like, this guy married us. And now I'm like, he left his wife. Like, what is going on? Like trying to help him through that. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, man. Like it's people's poor choices. Like at the end of the day, it's not. Yeah. But at the end of the, after they hired the new pastor, my wife became pregnant, and I quickly realized, like, hey, I need to take a step back. Like, I got a kid on the way. The church is still in a unique spot where they really couldn't I was only part-time, and I'm like, hey guys, I got I'm literally about to have a family to support. So
yeah,
I made the decision to take a step back and go into manufacturing. And I'm like, I'm just going to work a job for a while and just not even think about what is really going on and just kind of zone out for a while.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very, I've not ever been in that situation. I can't imagine how difficult that it had to be on you all as a church. But you probably had a pretty close relationship with the pastor, being the youth pastor.
We did. We were really close. We had a lot in common. He liked cars, so him and I would always talk about cars and stuff we wanted to do, and we really connected well. That's what made it really hard. And it was one of those things too. The first time I walked in the church, like him and I instantly connected, and we're like, man, I feel like I know you from somewhere. We didn't just, God connected us instantly. So it was like, it was like everything that somebody goes to Bible college's dream to connect with a pastor like this. And it's like, and all that got ripped away.
Yeah. Which is, you dealt with a lot of hurt and probably trying to understand how this can happen,
Yeah, absolutely.
So from there, where did you go? I mean, you just keep rolling with this, okay? Because I know you got a lot more to talk about.
Oh, yeah,
you let the Lord lead you, and you just roll.
Honestly, I wish I could say that was the worst church I went through, but we're just getting started here. So let's roll through what happened after that.
Okay.
About 2 years later, I started getting bored, and I worked at this manufacturing place. It was an amazing opportunity. It was one of those companies that people wanted to get in. Like, it was an ESOP company, so employees owned it. They're constantly giving you a percentage of the company, and they had already told me, like, hey, we want you to move up. We like you. But I was walking around. I was on the shift I wanted, working in the department I wanted, and they said I was next in line to be like the next lead operator and then a supervisor after that. I'm like, all right. God told me, you're not going to be here much longer. I'm like, God, this ain't funny. God, this is not funny. We just had our second kid, or we're about to, and God's like, you're not going to be here much longer. I found out about a church back in North Carolina. They were looking for a youth pastor. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to apply. My wife's like, I think we need to apply to this. I'm like, I have the dream job here. Like, what are you saying? So I got an interview at the church, met with the pastor, and they said, we'll get back to you. On the way home, my wife and I prayed, and we're like, we're supposed to move. With or without the job, we're supposed to move. I'm like, well, you know what? If they offer us a job, it's probably going to take a while to sell our house. This was back in 2013. So the market was it was slowly creeping back up. I'm like, you know what? In my mind, like the market's horrible still. So let's put our house up for sale.
Yeah.
So we call our realtor and he's like, you've only been in this house for a year, but you know what? The market's going up. I think you're going to be fine. So I'm thinking it's going to take 3 to 6 months to sell the house. We sold it in like, I want to say a month. We sold the house.
Nice. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right, God, you're doing something here.
Yeah.
Our house is sold, but I have no job. And God kept saying, do you trust me? Through this whole process, do you trust me? And I'm like, all right, God, I trust you. So we had some friends, they had a duplex, like, hey, you can move in. Our tenants just moved out. You guys can move in. Like, all right, we're driving down there. And it's one of those things. If anybody's ever applied to a job and you're waiting, you're checking your phone every 30 seconds. Like, all right, did an email come in? And we're driving. And I'm like, we're in West Virginia. Mom's like, why don't you just text the pastor? Just say, don't tell him what we did, because you don't want to scare him and say, hey, we're going to will our way into this job, because, sometimes people can do that. And I'm like, all right, we'll just say we're visiting friends. So I sent out an email. I'm driving through West Virginia, nothing. We get into North Carolina, my phone rings. And it's the pastor. I'm like, oh, he must have got my email. He's like, hey, Eddie, sitting here with my staff, wondered when you'd be available for an interview. I'm like, you didn't get my email, did you? He's like, no. I'm like, we'll be in North Carolina in about an hour, or we're in Kannapolis in about an hour. He's like, all right, cool. We'll wait for you. And they meet us out of the parking lot. Like, what's going on? I'm like, well, and God's like, you need to be honest with them. They're asking you what's going on. So in the parking lot of the church, I'm like, well, after we met, we put our house up for sale. And I just want to be very clear. And I was very clear. I'm like, look, we're not saying we're moving here for this job, but God told us to move. So we are moving. So we sold our house and we're down here setting up a duplex and I'm going to look for a job. And they looked at me like, you're serious right now? I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, funny thing, we wanted to offer you this job, but our only holdup was your house. And we didn't want you to move down here for a part-time job, but apparently God had it all worked out.
Oh, that's awesome.
Offered me the job that afternoon after we went to lunch. So then I'd tell my family, hey, I know I'm leaving this really great job for a part-time job in North Carolina with 2 kids. And my dad was not happy. He's like, son, you have 2 kids right now, 2 kids in the job everybody wants, and everybody loves you here. Because I actually got him in there, and he's like, everybody loves you here. What are you doing? I'm like, Dad, I got to follow God. He's like, all right, son, you feel like this is God, go for it. And it was good for a while. The church was going really well until the following year. The pastor called me and said, hey, we just went over our budget, because every year around Christmas, they do their annual budgets. They're like, and I originally was signed up just at a youth, and then some things happened where I ended up taking the person who's in charge of college stepped away. We'll just put it that way. They stepped away. They didn't want it. They couldn't do it anymore. They had some other obligations they had to take care of. My wife and I are like, man, we really want to do college because we saw the gap.
Yeah.
Just like Evan talked about what he does, we saw that gap too. We're like, hey, the church is really missing kids right out of high school. These young adults, they're missing that. Like, and if we're already doing youth, we could help transition them better, because, hey, you're hanging out with us in youth, now come to this college group. And they're like, okay, that's fine, but we need you to do children's too. And I'm like, I don't want to do children's. Like, it's either you get college and children, or you just stay with you. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, well, do I get more money with this? They're like, no, but we'll talk about that at the end of the year. If things go well, it will. I'm like, cool. So I go into this meeting, look at the budget, and they're like, hey, we had to make some cutbacks, and I'm like, so I'm not getting a raise. They're like, no, you're not getting a raise. We can't do it this year, but maybe in a few months we can relook at it. And if things get better, it'll be fine. And they kept looking at me really, really funny. I go out in my car, and Holy Spirit's like, you need to look at this. You're missing something. So I start flipping through the budget. I'm like, okay, I see where you cut this. on the last page, they had brought in another pastor full time to be an associate pastor. And I'm like, what? They didn't even tell me. And the guy was in the meeting with them, and no, they did not tell me at all. And I'm like,
you had no clue they just hired him as
he was volunteering for like the last 3 months. Before that, he was volunteering and just trying to help out, and he was in between things. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. He's just volunteering. But then they brought him on full time. So I was smart. I sat on it for a little bit and prayed. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
So I called the pastor and I called him out. I'm like, hey, man, what's up with this? He was like, because I thought they were bringing on part time. I was like, oh no, we're bringing him on full time. And I'm like, what? I'm like, well, we talked about, because I took on these other ministries, I'd get a raise. I said, I don't know what was going on with him at the time. But he's like, no, he's like, well, we can't. And he was starting to do some things that were raising some red flags with me. Like he had fired the entire finance team because he had claimed that they were trying to pay us all less. So he got rid of all of them. I'm like, that's weird. That doesn't sound like them. So I got to know a lot of them. But then he was like, we had a couple knockdown, drag out fights, like full blown exchanging words, not the most godly thing, but I was frustrated because I'm like, you straight up lied to me, man.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, so I straight up asked him, like, so what are you saying? I can't get a raise because you don't think I'm doing enough, which you hired me for one ministry. I'm now overseeing birth through college. So, it was elementary through college. And I had signed up for middle school and high school. I'm like, so what you're telling me right now is to come on full time, I need to do more than this. And mind you, I was also working a full-time job and doing this because they were only paying me part-time. I had 2 kids. Oh, and we just had a third baby. We just had our third baby. And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, you're going to have to do it. Absolutely. If you want more, you're going to have to take on more responsibilities. I'm like, where would you like me to do this? And I told him, like, I am not sacrificing my family to do ministry. I'm like, that is backward. And I quit. Like, I straight up just quit. So I'm like, you know what? If you're going to this is where it's going to go. We're not doing this right. So I quit right before Christmas. I quit. And they told me that, hey, they're getting ready to have their annual budget meeting. And they knew I was about to blow the whistle and just say, hey, guys, you need to look deeper in this budget. And I was lied to.
Yeah.
They told me, hey, if you keep your mouth shut, we'll give you a severance package. Well, as a dad with 3 kids and now only having one job, I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll do it. So they called me back in January because I held on to my key because I'm like, well, until you give me that, I'm not giving this up till you give me what you promised. They didn't realize it. They called me there on my 30th birthday. It'll be 10 years ago in January. I go to hand them my key. I'm like, so where's the check? They're like, what check? I'm like, I was promised a severance package. They're like, well, you quit. I'm like, yeah, and I was promised a severance package. They're like, well, this is just like corporate America. Pretty much they gave me the corporate America speech at a church. They're like, well, just like any other job, if you quit, there is no severance package, so you don't get anything. I'm like, what? I'm like, you're serious right now? I'm like, all right.
So you're lied to again.
Yeah, I was lied to again. So I'm like, good luck, guys. When we walked away, we didn't say anything. If we felt like we weren't supposed to, we prayed about it. Like, what should we do? Should we tell everybody we know? We're like, no, you know what? God will work this out.
That's all right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We walked away and I went and sold cars for a little while. And I was in a really, really, really dark season after that. I'm like, God, like, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing everything you've asked me to. And this is the second time I've got burned by a church. Like, I'm done. Like, I was like, God, I am done doing this. I sold cars. And then I made a dumb decision. When you are mourning or you are hurting or going through a dark time, do not make major life decisions. Just going to throw that out to the world. I know people say don't do it.
Yeah.
I did something that, looking back on this, almost ended my marriage. I went back to Ohio and visited the company. I was visiting my family for something I don't even know. And I called a guy that I used to work for at the company I'd left. I'm like, hey, man, you guys hiring? He's like, actually, we are. Come on down for an interview. And that day I got hired back on. Because I told my wife, because we were miserable, because we had lost our church. We'd lost a lot of friends over this.
Yeah.
People just weren't talking to us anymore. And we were in a really, really dark place. Instead of riding it out, we ran. We're like, let's go back to Ohio. Let's go back to the family. Once again, got in the company in a different department this time. And within a year, I got promoted again, and things are going great. But my family was miserable. Now, on paper, everything was perfect. I had one of the best jobs in the area. My parents lived right around the corner. My sister lived 2 minutes away. My kids were going to school with their cousins. On paper, it was perfect. But we weren't where we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
So my wife and I were miserable because I said, on paper, everything should have been great. And from a worldly perspective, everything was fantastic. But if you're not where God wants you to be, it doesn't matter. And that was the life lesson I had to learn the hard way there. Because my wife, she was miserable, and I was miserable because we went through this dark time, but God was doing some great things. I said, we were near family, so our kids were connecting with their cousins, and we actually went back to the church that I had worked at, and they had become their own church, and we got to see God let us see something awesome. God let us see the healing side of it. That community went through a lot. They got healed. They got better. They became their own campus, their own church. They're still under the umbrella of the other church. And then we got to meet the new pastor there, and they loved on us. And it was what my family needed at the time. The guy who was the intern pastor time saw us, and he called us out. Like our first Sunday there, he called us out, and everybody hugged us, and they're like, thank you for what you guys did. And they were just so loving. But at the end of the day, it wasn't where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So once again, I'm at work at this company that's the best company to work at in the area. And God's like, hey, I'm like, don't play this game. I'm like, I'm not playing this game right now. He's like, okay, I'll wait. I'll let you be a little bit more miserable, but you're not where basically it's like you need to leave. You're moving again. I'm like, God, I'm not doing this to my family. I'm not doing this. I cannot do this to my family. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I can't move back 2 years later. Like, I can't do it. Like, people are not going to believe me. I'm like, what do you want me to do here, God? God's like, you need to move. So I called a friend up and started talking to him, and he'd been talking to me for a while. He's like, hey, man, I don't think you're supposed to move. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, I don't think you're supposed to move. I think you ran. God was trying to do something, and you ran.
Yeah.
So my wife and I called another friend. He's like, hey, man, I can get you in through he's an insurance agent. He's a fantastic guy, Christian. And he's like, I think I can get you in this insurance company. So my wife and I go down to North Carolina for it was our 10th anniversary. So it's been a while. We go on our anniversary. On the way back, we drive through, and I go take this test, and I fail this test miserably. And part of it was I put a lot of stipulations on God. I'm like, God, if we're moving this time, I'm not getting screwed. It was pretty much my whole mindset. I'm like, I want a job. I want this. I made the mistake of trying to make a list to God. And God's like, really? Go on.